Today's interview is with Angelo Martucci. Angelo's a fun, high energy guy, and I really enjoyed talking to him. He's an appraiser, right? A residential appraiser. So really gives us some really interesting insight into what it goes into the value of a home, right? And he gives us some tips about the main things that they take into consideration. He also invests himself, so he's got an interesting investment journey that he talks about. So stick around for all of that. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate, the YouTube channel. Go to the WWRE Podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a review. It really does help me grow this platform. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you're interested in real estate, whatever capacity that is, I'd love to get on the phone and have that conversation with you and see if there's any way I can help you whatsoever. So go to the link in the description down below or go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com and sign up there. But before that, enjoy today's awesome interview with Angelo Martucci. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now we have Angelo Martucci. How do I say that properly?
Martucci.
Okay, perfect.
Guy.
Hey, Angelo, how you doing, man?
Good, man. Just keeping busy here. Market's busy. Right now is on the appraisal side with all the refinance and purchase going on. So it's definitely it's moving along. Can't complain. You know, like we discussed earlier, I took a complaint from a tenant. Well, actually, my property manager about a heat complaint in a brand new apartment with a brand new heating system. So, you know, it's always something. I knew this was going to happen. I said, I haven't heard from a tenant all week, and they're going to contact me as I'm going on this podcast, because this is my first podcast. So now I'm like nervous about, you know, but it's all good. It's what we do, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure we'll touch on that afterwards. But Angelo, I'm happy you made time, man, and we were able to make this happen. You said this is your first podcast, but you're going to be awesome. I already can tell. Like we talked beforehand, man. You're a ball of energy, and you have so much energy and so many great stories to share. But before we jump into the conversation, just so people can understand, do you want to give us an idea about your background, what you've been up to, and what you're currently up to these days?
So the background initially came the whole segue into the whole real estate industry. As we discussed earlier, I'm a real estate appraiser. I'm a state certified real estate appraiser. But prior to becoming an appraiser, I started learning about this like right out of high school, real estate. So I'm going to go back. We're going to go back like this we discussed with the whole freshman year of college. Okay. So it was my freshman year. You go to county college. I had no idea what I was going to do, like everybody else. And you go to school just because that's the thing to do. So I end up going to county college, and I'm there. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm taking courses. I'm in a business course, and the professor was very heavy into real estate. And he told us a whole story how he goes, I graduated bottom of my class. I didn't have any money. I was an idiot. And I ended up graduating college, getting a job, and made all these investments. He goes, I made all my money through investments. I didn't make them through my job. And he was heavy into this. So lo and behold, I'm thinking like, what am I doing here anyways? I'll just become an investor. You know what I mean? So now I'm in school doing my thing, whatever. And I think it was him or somebody in the class, or somehow I was brought up about Robert Kiyosaki's book, The Rich Dad book. So I don't even know how I got my hands on this. I don't know if somebody had given it to me, or I don't know how I got it, but I ended up reading it probably a year later, like my sophomore year of college. So I end up reading this. I'm working in like a car dealership. I'm making $11 an hour. I'm like, how am I going to invest in real estate if I don't have any money? But I'm reading this book. So I end up finishing it, and I tried getting into it back in 2000. Man, this is 2002. I tried getting involved in a deal, and now it's going into 03, and the whole deal just fell apart. I was going in with a partner who's a relative. They didn't know what they were doing. I didn't know what I was doing. It was a mess. It didn't go anywhere. We ended up buying something. We didn't close on it. The whole deal fell apart before we even closed because we couldn't get a mortgage or anything. So that kind of brought me into in the meantime, just stay in school, finish, get my associates. I finished. Now I'm about to go get accepted into a 4-year school. Now I have no idea what I'm going to do. But I knew it was 2004 and people were starting to make a lot of money in real estate. And it's something I wanted to learn. So I was looking into what should I do? I didn't want to just jump into investors because everybody got you scared of it. It was only, even from back then, people were like, oh, you're crazy. You had to have some background. Like maybe I'll do a real estate appraisal, home inspection, do something where I can actually have a trade under my belt and then segue that down the road into investing. So this started like when I was 21, 22, all these ideas. But it took me 10 years to actually pull the trigger on an investment because of just the economy and everything that happened. But we'll get into that. So now I'm trying to see exactly where I'm at in the segue. So now I get my associates. I'm trying to figure out what to do. So it's a summertime, 22 years old. I'm out drinking, of course. And my friend's brother's there. And he was doing mortgages at the time. And he was killing it in the mortgage game. So I said to him, I'm like, listen, I want to get involved in real estate. Would you like to get me a job, doing mortgages or doing something, something with lending, because that's a good field to get in with. And he's like, listen, you don't want to do this. He goes, it's long hours. You're behind a desk. You want to be out and about. Do you mind sitting behind a desk? I'm like, I don't know, man. So he goes, all right, how about this? Why don't you become a real estate appraiser? Because then you'll be in the field, you'll learn the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of everything, and you could eventually learn the investing side of it from there. So right away, like the next day, I started calling schools to become an apprentice. I'm like, yo, I'm doing this, and especially because he told me you could kind of you could kind of work around your own schedules and stuff like that. So I called right away, got into school, finished up. And then it was hard becoming an apprentice because even back then, nobody wanted to take an apprentice because if you mess up on something, you're on a line with the bank. Mm-hmm. So I end up waiting. I mean, Barry, I called so many companies, nobody wanted to hire me. So finally, through word of mouth and networking, I end up getting hired by a very big real estate appraisal company that specializes in residential and commercial. I met the boss who ended up becoming one of my mentors because he had the appraisal business. He also owned the entire building that it was located in, huge building, which now he has rented out. The second floor, first floor is a sports bar, plus he owned rental properties. So I kind of knew back then, all right, this could be a good thing, But I was a newbie. I was 22, not even 23. All the guys I worked with were in their 60s and 70s. So they were like, yo, we're not giving this young guy anything, So now I'm in there. I'm working towards. I'm trying to see exactly where it was. So yeah, it was like 04, 05. So now I'm working. They start giving me business, and he goes, "Listen, we're going to give you the work nobody wants. We're going to give you multifamilies in the middle of Newark, New Jersey, Irvington. I mean, these are bad neighborhoods. I had to go into the middle of the day, and they were just run down homes. But he's like, nobody else wants to take them. And at the time, I'm like, listen. Number one, I need to work. Number two, what's a better way to learn multifamily investing? What's better than doing the appraisals on multifamily properties? So then you're going out there, you're meeting with people. And then, I started doing that. And I wasn't even, I was still like, let me learn this and then I'll get involved in investing. So then time's going by. Now you're in 06. Now I'm meeting investors who are flipping homes, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But when I sat there and actually broke the numbers down, I was like, in North Jersey, the New York metro area, whatever you want to call this area, Hudson, Bergen, Essex County, the price of real estate was so high that even if you bought a 4-unit and rented it all out, it's barely even cash flowing. So I'm like, how do these numbers even make sense? If in order for them to make sense, you had to go into like the worst of the worst neighborhoods, So now we fast forward. I'm like, I'll just put it on the back burner. I'm gonna have to save more money. I'm not gonna be able to invest yet. So now you're going through 06. Now you're going to 07, the end of 07. Things are starting to get shaky. Things are getting really weird. That appraisal company I worked for, the volume slowed down considerably. It was like overnight, just slowed down. I was working side business with another appraisal company. He was like, yo, I think we're going to close our doors after 20 something years. So, the market went from being overinflated to the point where there was no purchase or refinance transactions at all, and the rates were really high. And then it was just like a snowball of everything. So I was like, you know what? Still not time to invest. Let me concentrate. So I got licensed by the state, became an appraiser at the end of 07, the worst time ever to start an appraisal business. Going into 08, now I start my own appraisal business, and it's making nothing. So now it's like, all right, well, real estate in general is just not good. I got to build up this appraisal business before I can start investing. So now the crash comes. Everybody's like, don't invest, don't buy anything, don't do anything with real estate. Not a good time. And I was just chugging along with the appraisal stuff as much as I could. But at the very end of 08, around 09, at very end of 08, I started seeing the opportunities come up on the market. Short sale, foreclosure, must sell, as is, corporate owned, bank owned, motivated sale. You're seeing this on the MLS. Like, all right, now you're starting to see the snowball at the end of 08. REO foreclosure, Bank of America, you name it, they were all out there. And then, so now my mentor at that time, things were just bad. He goes, listen, we're going to do, or this is crazy. He goes, we're going to do a real estate investment course. I want everybody to come in because we need to talk. So he ends up coming in. We end up going in. We do a real estate investor, this investor course, and he gets up in front of the class, in front of everybody, and he goes, there's a small window of opportunity with these REO foreclosures that you're never going to see again. You might never see this for the rest of your life. He's like, it's going to be bad. This guy, I mean, at the time, God rest his soul, he was such a good mentor. At this time, he was already well into his 70s, probably 80 years old at the time. And he goes, I'm telling you, it's going to be bad, and you got to jump on this and strike while the iron's hot. So he goes, we're going to segue this into bringing in this organization. I don't even want to mention their name. It was a very big investment group. So we get to they do a whole class, a seminar on this. They get done with it, and it was like $35,000-$40,000 to get involved with this course.
Yeah.
I go, you could go buy a house right now for $40,000. It's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. And then it was like a pyramid. Well, if you sign up and then you get one person and you get a discount, I'm like, the whole thing is defunct. I actually looked it up last night, and right after they had that class, the thing went out of business. I don't even want to mention their name. It was so shady. But I'm like, I'm surprised that my supervisor didn't really, but he was just trying to lead us in the right direction because he saw we were all struggling, So now,
so let me stop you there for a second. So that's a lot of stuff. So before we go jumping in further, that's a lot of stuff. Talk about how it was like leading up. You told me beforehand, but talk about as an appraiser during that time, right? You started in, I think, 04 or something like that, leading up to when it crashed. What kind of stuff were you seeing? What kind of craziness? Because for people who weren't around and didn't know, I wasn't around, I know. What kind of craziness were you seeing as an appraiser at that time?
In 06, when it was at the balloon, when it was at the height, I would do a 4-unit house. I did a 4-unit house in the middle of Elizabeth, New Jersey. The guy was putting no money down, investment property on a 4-unit, no money down. I don't even think he had income verification. And I knew this because you would see it come over from the bank. You would see the order come from the bank, and it would say investment property, 4-unit, 100% financing. And I'm like, what the heck? That was, I actually remember that house because I would think the appraisal came in at 450, and I saw it 2 years later on the market for like 220 as is. So it just split in half the value. So you were just seeing that people, first-time home buyers, no money down. I mean, you would do a house in 05, and then in 06, it would be worth $100,000 more. It was getting pumped up and pumped up. And a lot of them were 100% financing. I mean, we don't know as appraisers what goes on the back end with the loans and stuff, but you're just seeing it. There wasn't any really FHA at all. We weren't doing any FHA work at all. It was just that subprime. And guys would buy homes privately, investors. But I knew guys who were bird dogging and wholesaling before anybody knew who wholesale were, before they even knew what it was. And these guys will go out, knock on doors, distressed home, tell the owner we'll buy it with a conventional loan for X amount of dollars under market value, and then do a fast flip out of it to somebody else and make like $90,000 without doing anything to it.
That's nuts.
And I'm like, I'm in the wrong business. You know what I mean? so that was like, it was just like a snowball effect. It's like all the areas you saw the major appreciation, the urban areas, was the same areas you saw all those listings just start crashing downwards overnight, man. It was like that. And like I said, a lot of those buyers, they were long gone. The finances got so much stricter, and you went from having a medium the inventory was relative, and then it just went to the point where the inventory was through the roof. I mean, in any one town, there was like, a town like mine, the inventory is so low right now. In my town, there's 20,000 residents and only 17 properties on the market in this whole entire town of 20,000 residents. Back in a healthy market, there would be maybe 30 homes on the market, 30, 40. And then during the crash, it went to like 100 homes on the market in this town. And it was just nuts, And it was just such a bad time because the negative concept that people were like, don't buy, that those homes sit there and the new homes come on, and it piled up to the point where there was just a sufficient amount of homes for anybody to buy. You could steal anything,
Yeah. Well, so as an appraiser at that time, how do you appraise this, man? Right? Because like you said, prices are going up 100,000 in a year. You were an appraiser during that time, right? Just to make sure that I understand. So how do you appraise it? How do you like come up with a value? Because what a property's worth this week compared to what it's worth next week or next month, it's completely different probably, right? I heard properties would go to 20, 30,000 in a month sometimes in some areas. How are you keeping up with that as an appraiser?
It was insane at one point, and it was probably one of the only times in history I remember my supervisor telling me that it got to the point where you actually, on the appraisal report, it asks you if the market is stable, increasing. You actually have to put increasing and then use the comparables as recent as possible. So if the date's December 4th, he's like, try to use all comparables of homes that closed since October 4th or maybe September. And if they closed 6 months ago, you had to do a calculated time adjustment against them to increase it, kind of like what's going on now. So that's where we started coming up. Now, when the market was crashing, that was the worst time ever to be an appraiser, because you had to put disclosures and 1004 MC forms, and you had to put underwriting disclosures of the market going downwards and was affected. I mean, that was the nightmare, because in an appraisal report, you're allowed to go up to 12 months prior from the date of inspection. So if you inspect a home on November 1st, you could go back November 1st, 2019, a full year. So now you could be in 08 and you could be ripping comps from a year ago. And it's hard to find the adjustment. But then you started to see it where you had to use them as recent as possible, put it at decline in market, the disclosures, it took so long to do one appraisal. When you broke it down, you were making like $12 an hour. I'm not even joking. It was that much. And the banks were so heavy on us with disclosures because they saw the writing on the wall, saw it collapse.
So you've seen some similarities. Now, obviously, it's not the same because of different market forces in place, but you've seen some similarities today to what it was back then in terms of price appreciation. You know what's going on?
It's insane, man. It's gone up, but that's where I'm torn, because part of me is like, last time I saw this, we saw the writing on a wall and it dropped. But then again, as everybody says, I'm not a financial expert. The ninja loans are gone. The 100% financing is gone. All that dirty lending and all that garbage is gone. However, you do have high risk loans there right now. Like FHA kind of stepped into place of subprime. So I just saw 2 FHA HUD homes come on the market in a city that I invest. They were in foreclosure. So I don't know, man. It's pumping high. This market's insane right now.
Yeah, I think it's the same nationwide, right? Like everyone I speak to all across the country, low inventory, high prices, low interest rates, right? So it's just driving up that prices, because like you said, if there's normally double that inventory where you're living, right? And people are still can afford to buy homes because of the low interest rate, well, it's going to drive up prices, right? It's the same here in Vegas. Prices are just going astronomically high. They just keep it hitting record high after record after record high, because you still have those buyers, because they can afford to with that interest rate. They have more buying power, but you have such low inventory. There's like a home is decently priced. You have 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 offers on that property. It's a bidding war. It's going to go for above or at least they're going for list price. It's just insane. So I don't know. It's hard to see where it's going to go from here, right? Because you can't continue on this kind of trajectory.
It's insane. And the only thing that scares me is if and when the rates do go up, it could put that bounce back where it's like, all right, that overinflation could just overnight because the affordability is going to change with those monthly payments, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot. But then again, I don't know if you guys are seeing a mass exodus from California. We're seeing a mass exodus from Hudson County, New Jersey, which is Jersey City, Hoboken, New York City, Brooklyn. People are fleeing that area and they're coming here. So even if it goes down, you still have that demand and drive coming from there. So there's so many factors that go into it, you know. As an appraiser, I'm seeing guys flip homes and they have buyers from New York City willing to just pay a fortune. You know, they'll sell their condo in New York and then go to a single family home, say a suburban area, and they'll pay a fortune to pay over list price because they need to get out. So even if the market does drop, you still have that demand, which you guys might have that in Vegas too with the California exodus.
Yeah, no, it's definitely that's happening as well. So it's like you said, it's that interesting, you know, yin and yang, right? Is there enough people coming in from California to kind of to keep that market afloat, or is some other factors? I don't know. I'm just like you, man. I'm not an economist. I don't understand. I'm not smart enough to understand this. It's just really fascinating for me to hear and see what's going on. So you said you're an appraiser, right? And I think it would be really interesting for us, for people, if you walk through the process of how you appraise a home so that we can understand, right? So if someone's flipping, or even if you're buying a rental, you want your home to be worth more so you can do a cash out refinance, or you can pull a HELOC, or even if you have to sell. Walk us through the process of what you look for in an appraisal and how you actually appraise a home.
Interesting, man. So many people, so many investors ask me this.
Yeah.
So if it depends. I mean, if it will purchase, refinance, obviously if it's a purchase, we look at the purchase contract to see if it can meet the whatever. Right. But let's just break it down real simple. Let's say a 3-bedroom house, 3-bedroom colonial in an area. It's a very long process. So we're going to go there, measure the home. We have to get the exact square footage, the exact bedroom count, bathroom count. And then from there, we have the home, and we need to draw circumference around the subject property 1 mile to look at homes that are similar to those specific, those specifications of the subject property. However, if there's one thing that throws the home in a different direction, it throws the whole appraisal in a different direction. Let's say it's a three-bedroom colonial, simple 3-bedroom colonial. All the homes in a neighborhood are on, a 25 by 100 lot, and you're on like a 100 by 100 lot. Now your whole entire report is structured different. So we go in there, we take the photos, take the measurements, and I tell everybody, investors, the biggest thing we look at is square footage, bedroom count, and condition. And when I say condition, kitchens and baths, condition of the kitchens and baths. You have some people who, this happens all the time. I've done divorce cases, all kinds of stuff where people they're like, I spent $100,000. I'm like, well, what'd you do? They go, I put a new roof on. Well, you have to do new roof. I painted the outside. Well, you have to paint the outside. You have to do your landscape. They put it all on the outside. They didn't do anything at the inside of the house. At the end of the day, their home was still a little 2-bedroom ranch. And that actually came down in a divorce case that somebody hired me as an expert witness, where a husband and wife, the wife spent $60,000 and she did all these improvements. She built retaining walls. She built all this stuff at the outside of the house. The husband goes, I guarantee this house didn't go up $1 from the time we bought it. All the money you spent, you didn't do anything to the inside of the house. It got so bad. I guess they got divorced over it because they had to hire me as an expert witness. I ended up going to do the appraisal. I'm like, yeah, your home hasn't gone up $1 in value since you bought it 3 months ago. I mean, you did everything to the outside. So looking at it, that standpoint, kitchens, bathrooms, because it's on the Fannie Mae form that we have to specify if they were renovated and when they were renovated, and pretty much the level of renovation, if it was a light rehab or a full renovation. So those are some of the main things we look at. And you know what? Invest in a home, kitchen, investing and flipping, kitchens to baths, most important.
Wow, yeah, that's such a great insight, man. That's so interesting. So the biggest thing you can do, if you can increase square footage, if you can add a bedroom or a few bedrooms, and then the kitchen and the bathroom, that's the main ways that you're going to increase the value, and that's the main considerations you have when you're doing an appraisal.
Yeah, it's huge. I should actually flip this around and show you. The reports are very extensive. I mean, Let me real
How long
quick.
does it take you? Don't worry about it. Don't worry. Just how long does it take you to do an appraisal?
The house I'm doing now, because I do a lot of high end stuff, it's $1 million home. So by the time you drive there, do the inspection, the photos, measurements, everything, put the whole thing together, breaking down the comparables to derive the values, the hardest part, because those numbers could be skewed in 20 different directions. You could pull up, like for instance, this house is like 1.1 million I'm doing. The homes on that street, similar size, range from like $1 million to 1.6 million. You have a range of 600,000. So to break down this report is probably going to take a good 5 hours.
Wow, that's a lot.
Multifamily house. If I'm doing like a 3-unit multifamily home FHA, that appraisal, it's an 8-hour workday.
Wow. That's you don't. I'm glad you're sharing that, because you don't, right? You don't. I've bought a few properties. You don't take into consideration, right? You only look at as what the appraisal comes in, right? You don't think about the work that goes into it. So I appreciate you sharing it, because hopefully anyone who's buying homes now, they'll have more understanding and more appreciation for what the appraiser does to come to that value. I got to ask you this though. It seems to happen quite often. My wife's a real estate agent here in Vegas, and so the amount that they're buying it for, quite often the appraisal comes in almost identical to that, unless there's a huge disparity. Is that just pure coincidence, or do appraisals look at what the purchase price is and take that into consideration?
Definitely.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, but I was wondering.
It's a target. Right. So even one of our, because there was so much regulation with the Dodd-Frank on the appraisers. Like when this whole market collapsed, they put it on the back of the appraisers. Like, wait, you guys were the ones who said those homes were worth that amount? Well, you guys are responsible for making the market collapse, pretty much. So they turned a report that would take 3 hours into like 9 hours. And I knew appraisers that were getting slapped. I got slapped with a lawsuit. Thank God I won the case. Guy buys a house. And he's like, I don't want to pay my mortgage anymore. My home is worth less than I bought it for. So I'm going to sue everybody. He sued the agent, the appraiser, everybody. And I actually knew an appraiser who just minding his own business, went out one day, does an appraisal for a guy. The guy never even moves in the house, never makes a mortgage payment. The bank that he did the appraisal for was one of the big 5 that control this country. Boom, slapped him with a lawsuit. And he goes, I wasn't my fault he didn't move in the house.
Yeah.
And he had it. I mean, granted, in my case, obviously I won my case. It dragged on for years. I won, I got out, everything was good. But our insurance goes through the roof. So people think like, oh, you're not worth. I've seen appraisers get slammed. I've seen guys lose their license, get slapped with penalties left and right. The state doesn't care. They'll just slap you with penalties. I've seen them actually go into appraisals on flips, and they had expert witnesses in the attorney general's office underwrite the appraisal that was done and sent to the bank. And they go, we're going after the appraiser for this. This is an overinflated appraisal report. And he had misleading representation or whatever it is, with his calculations and adjustments. So it really, really gets down to the gritty. Now back to your question, because the appraisal, I got to the investor, because this is a whole course on appraisal.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting for people, though. I think
very interesting.
Yeah.
So the sale price, okay, I was taught if you're in that exact bracketed range, you're good to go. So let's say, it's $1 million sale price and all your comps right there, 950 to 1.1, or right. It's right there. It's a clear writing. It's $1 million. You can make it work. I mean, but now the problem we're up against is the overbidding war. So now if a home is for $1 million and a contract is say 1.2 million, which I've seen, I'm going out there, I do the appraisal and it's listed for $1 million. The person put an offer at 1.2. My appraisal says, let's say it comes in at 1.1. As an appraiser, I have to put a disclosure to the bank. They want to know, why is this thing appraised for more than it's listed for? And why the hell is your appraisal less than the purchase price? Mm-hmm. So you can't win, So that's where we're up against now, where people they're just throwing bids. I seen one guy come $400,000 over the list price and the appraised value of a home.
Wow, that's
$400,000 over.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's
fascinating. So to answer your question, as long as they're within that range of 20%, if the sales are within 20% of the sale price, mm-hmm. the overwhelming majority of appraisers, it's going to come in at value. Mm-hmm. We have that buffer.
Yeah, That makes sense. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Man, that was an interesting insight. But obviously, you're an investor as well, which I think is really cool, right? And you had that goal initially from an early age to invest, because that was so cool of your professor to because not many people that make good money like a professor or decent money like a professor, they don't invest, right? And it's cool that you were open to that, and that you had that goal all along. So to this day, what does your investments look like? How many properties do you own, and what do you invest in?
Yeah, so let's segue that. So now I was doing the appraisals, I was learning all that stuff. So I end up buying. So I end up wanting to invest. So I end up like, I need to buy something. I need to move out of my house. So like, you're at that point in your life where everybody's like, oh, you got to buy a house. You got to do something with your life. So long story short, I find this home. It's under market value. It's a short sale. I'm like, I'm buying it and I'm moving in it. So I'm going to have built-in equity. So I guess I'm an investor now. So I end up buying this dump house. I bought it at like $60,000 under market value. I end up buying this house, ripping it into pieces. And I'm like, I don't know. Is this what I'm going to do? Work 1,000 hours a week as an appraiser and just live in this house? If I saw the opportunity here, I could see the opportunity somewhere else. So now the wheels are starting to turn as to like, all right, can I flip this thing and get out of it? It's going to be my first flip. So all this is going on. I'm ripping the house apart. I'm doing all that. And at the same time, I'm doing appraisals for hard money lenders, as I was telling you about earlier. And the hard money lender appraisals, we have to derive two values, an as is and an ARV, and stamp that appraisal report. So now I'm learning how this whole process is. Oh, this is what you buy for 100. It's worth 250. Okay. Now you just got to learn the construction. So I'm learning all this. And, I'm still ripping apart this house I'm working on. And then finally, this is, I'm saying to myself, this is the whole plan, having this whole thing. 2014 hits. I'm doing a lot of work for banks on foreclosures. They're foreclosing on homes, and I'm doing the appraisals for investors. So I'm starting to see in New Jersey, the way it hit is our foreclosure laws are different in other states. It takes a long time. So in 2008, the 2009 crash really hit here in 2014. That's when I really saw it. But at the same time, the market was going up. So you had two markets going on here. So I go out there, I'm doing these appraisals, and some of them are for investors. So now I'm picking their brain. What are you doing? How are you doing this? What's going on? I'm asking 101 questions. I end up meeting my mentor at this time, actually two guys. One guy who was in a crew of guys in Newark, New Jersey who were doing it. Another guy in Patterson. So they were teaching me the burst strategy. No flipping. They're like, we don't flip nothing. They go in, rehab the whole thing, get it all done and rent it out. But the neighborhoods they were doing this in were rough. I'm not going to lie. Because in New Jersey, in this market, to buy a 4-unit in my town, you're paying $1 million. You're not going to make any money on it. You're in a true, like, nice area. So you go into the inner city. So I'm like, how are you collecting rent? They go Section 8. Section 8 is great. So these guys were heavy on Section 8. Which I knew about all the way from when I started. So I'm like, I got to get involved in this. When I tell you, I took that house I was working on, I put it on the market. I'm like, yo, I'm selling this house, taking the money. It's just dead money sitting there. Some of these guys will say that it's just dead equity. Rip that out, and I'm going to start investing. So then I bought my first flip right after that. And that was, I took the money, and then I went to the bank because I was scared to get hard money. Everybody's so scared of hard money. Hard money is the greatest thing in the world. As long as you have a good lender and you go to the right lender and your numbers add up, hard money is the greatest thing you could have. I tell people, you can't, I understand it's scary and the word's scary and everybody's going to try to tell you not to use it. You can't, else would you leverage in life on these deals? So my first deal, I was scared to use hard money. So what I did is, because I had the appraisal business, the bank was offering business lines of credit. And I'm like, they kept sending me stuff in the mail. I'm ignoring it. I'm thinking it's junk mail. I'm one of those people, I think everything's BS. I'm like, I'm throwing it in the mail. So one day I walk into the bank and I go, what's this unsecured line of credit? They go, listen, if you've been in business for more than 2 years, we'll give you $50,000 cash, unsecured. They go, if you want more, you're going to have to fill out like all this paperwork, whatever. I'm like, give me the 50,000. I could go, the foreclosures were so low at that time, I could go and buy something for 50 grand. So I'm like, give me the business line of credit. Took the business line of credit for 50. I took that. I had the money, everything lined up, and I'm looking for multifamilies to burn. All right. So I'm looking and it's getting competitive. I can't find anything because guys are swapping them up left and right. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll flip something, use the same strategy. I'll do a flip just to get warmed up and then do it. So then I found my first flip. It was a townhouse and it was in a neighborhood. I used to do appraisals all the time. The ARV 70%. It was on the market for $99,000. I took the $50,000 line of credit. I went to somebody I knew and said, asked them, and I couldn't. I would never do this. I said, listen, 50,000. I took out a private loan with somebody and offered them points on the loan. So they would act as a hard money lender because I was just scared to go to a hard money lender. So I came up with the $100,000, got my first property. And this is funny, man. Now at this time, I'm still learning from my mentors who are doing the burr stuff about flipping and doing all this. I get it. I line it up. And this is great because it was a townhouse. So to me, I didn't have to do roofing, siding, windows. I didn't have to do anything on it. The front was beautiful landscape. It just, it didn't have a kitchen in it. Like it was just a kitchen. And then it had, I think the heat was shot. That was it. So now look at what the cost to replace that. It's still, there was such a margin. So all I had to do was go and pretty much do that. So I'll never forget. It was a rainy October day. I'm at the closing table. Now I'm nervous. So I'm like, this is my first flip. I'm at the closing table. My attorney's sitting there. He goes, oh man, this weather's miserable. He goes, it's a good night to sit home and have a glass of whiskey. He's like, what are you doing later? I go, bro, I'm getting in a car with a hammer and chainsaw and whatever else I need after this. And I'm going to start demoing that friggin' house, man. I'm not waiting on this at all. I was so pumped up to do it. So I got in the car in the pouring rain. My mother was even excited. She goes, I want to go see that. She ended up going with me. I ended up going there in the pouring rain, took the sledgehammer, and just started busting out the kitchen and working on it. Cause I'm like, listen, time waits for no man. Let's get the clock ticking and start rolling with this.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And that was it. Yeah, that was my first flip.
Wow. But to this day now, what is your portfolio? What do you own these days? What is it? And what is your investment strategy today?
Okay. So I did the flip. Okay. So I get the first flip and, I put the, I buy this home, I do the rehab, but at the same time, I'm still looking for investments because the main goal was to get rental properties. Because I know the flipping's a lot. It's a job. You know what I mean? I mean, the investments, they're not, I don't want to say they're 100% passive, but they're more passive. And from what my mentors taught me, they're like, listen, you get these bird deals, they're so good. You should be able to rip your money out and then you're cash flowing every month. So you're getting paid twice. You know, with a flip, you're just banking on one person buying it. So I put this home on the market and I'm looking, I put it on February 1st. I want to say, what was it, Super Bowl Sunday? By Valentine's Day, got the phone call, was under contract. I went out looking for deals to burr. Couldn't find any multis. Like I said, they were getting sucked up. So I took the money and put it in another flip. So now I put the money in another flip. And then as soon as I put that under contract, I start working on that flip, and that's when the first multifamily popped up. And I contacted, because I'm an MLS member, I contacted the agent direct. He's like, listen, it's under contract already. I'm like, damn. So now 2 weeks go by. I'm working on my flip. Because now remember, I spread the money. I took my primary, I sold, and I took this flip. So I put the money in one flip, and then I'm looking for this other multifamily deal to come on. A week later, it comes back on the market. Email me, goes, yo, the buyer backed out. Jump on this. Full offer. Put the offer, $48,000 for a 2-family. Okay, so now I got to learn the ropes. So now I feel like I'm over leveraged. Now the neighborhood was rough. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, a lot of people they don't like C&D neighborhoods. This was to me a security thing. Monetarily security because you're getting your Section 8 payment every month, but physically it's a security threat because I mean, it's this area. You go down there at night, they're getting shot up. It's crazy. But the numbers were so good and the taxes were low, the whole thing worked. And I'm like, listen, if you want to be a multifamily investor, you have to start somewhere. You know, if the numbers make sense, they make sense. And I'm following these investors and these mentors where it's working. So that was it. I got my first 2-family under contract, sold that flip, got out of that, had a 2-family going. And then as soon as I got the money from that, I made like $18,000 working on that flip for like a year. I took the money, boom, got another 2 unit. Then as we're working on, boom, got another multi-fit. And that's how we just started rolling with the burst strategy. But that was, don't get me wrong, when I went into that city, I just didn't jump into that city. I did a lot of research, which whether you're a newbie, oldie, whatever, research the market you want to go in, because it will educate you more than anything, any courses you ever take.
That's awesome.
And
I love your energy. You probably don't sleep at night, huh? You can tell you're a super high energy person, but I love you. You're obviously a person that takes massive action, right? Like early on when you talked about you wanted to get into appraising, you called like 10 people, right? Most people call one or two, like, okay, I can't get in. You weren't going to say no for take no for an answer, right? You were going to find someone that was going to make it work. And it seems like the same then when you got that grip between your teeth about rental properties, right? You were going to make it happen, right? You were going to find ones eventually, you're going to flip ones and then find one and then keep it going. And man, you just you have that can-do personality. I can just tell, man. It's just awesome to hear.
Well, you know what it is? It just, I'll be honest with you, Barry, it dragged on for so long. I wanted to start about, this started when I saw the writing on the wall in 2010, and I was watching the market collapse at work and doing these REOs. I wanted to buy into deals of people like, nah, you don't want that. You need all cash. You can't get a mortgage. The homes are distressed. You don't know construction. If you told anybody, there was so much negativity coming down on you that you're like, you know what, they're right, I'm not going to do this. And that's what drove me away, because if I hadn't listened to all these idiot people, I would have jumped in the game earlier and my portfolio would probably be double. So, don't get me wrong, what happened was I saw the writing on the wall. As an appraiser, I saw the drop. And then I was like, oh, I hope my opportunity didn't pass me by. And then I met these investors that they're like, no, the opportunities are there. You just got to be aggressive, jump on these. So a deal will come up, somebody would take it. A deal will come up. So I was like grinding like all night. I don't even watch TV. I'm just looking for deals all night. And that's how I landed my first 2-family on the Burr. And then and that was the hardest one to land. And then while that was as soon as that one got finished, one comes on the market. I jumped on because that was my golden. That's my baby. I love that second house. It was underpriced. The appraisal. I mean, I was so psycho when I did my numbers. I did the appraisal of, all right, I'm going to hold this forever. What would this be worth if the market crashed? Let's go back 5-10 years when the market crashed to see what it was worth. Mm-hmm. And there still was equity in the deal. So you locked up the second one, and then like I said, it's just that snowball. But once again, the hardest thing is breaking down the numbers and the construction. And like I said, that first year of me wanting to buy rental property, everybody was like, you're out of your mind. You're in New Jersey. You can't evict people. You can't do this. You can't do that. I mean, there's so much. At the end of the day, you have to educate yourself on how it works, how your laws work, and exactly what you want to do. And it's worked out well with the Section 8. I mean, it's unbelievable, the strategy.
Yeah.
So now it's, you started with the 2, and then I went from 2 to 2 to another 2 to a big 4 unit to a big 3 unit. So we scaled up a lot, man. It's been good. I can't complain.
I love your story, man. I love your story. I appreciate you sharing all that, man. It's really cool. But as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, I always like to ask some wrestling-related real estate questions. And the first one is, what would your wrestling name be? If you picked a wrestling name for yourself, what would it be, you think?
What was that wrestler, Superfly Jimmy Snuka? Was that his name?
Yeah.
I'd be the ultimate landlord.
I love that. Instead of the ultimate warrior, the ultimate landlord. That's awesome. That's perfect.
Yeah, man. Hey, my tenants like me, so
that's a good thing. Every wrestler has a special move, right? It's their biggest strength. What is your special move in real estate? What's your biggest strength, you think?
I would say having to be it's got to be the mentality, being psycho. Like when when I couldn't get that first deal, when I saw those multifamilies and I learned a burst strategy and I walked through these neighborhoods, I mean, I was nuts. I was out on Saturday mornings driving through like literally crack dens. I mean, I was going to neighborhoods where crack dealers were coming up to my car. It was nuts because I saw the opportunity. So it was just, It had to be just the persistence. I was nuts. I would get to the point where I'd work all day, go to the gym, come home at night, and sit there all night looking and analyzing deals, and then go out over the weekend and just start shopping. So it probably have to be the psycho. It's a little too much for some people, but I would have never locked those deals because when the competition's there, is getting into the wrestling game. When the competition's there, you got to step your game up. Mm-hmm. And I saw this coming at 14. There's a lot of investors now. You can't touch anything on the market. So I would definitely say the energy going into looking for deals was definitely the strength.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I can definitely tell that you have that passion for it. It's so cool to hear. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your investing career?
What's that?
What's been the biggest body slam? What's been the biggest setback? What's been something that's...
You know what? There's the psychological setbacks because you see the deals, but you can't get the cash. 2010, you couldn't get the hard money. You couldn't get the cash. So all that was a setback. It was a psychological setback where you're like, oh, I'm scared. Listen, everybody's scared. Everybody's scared to do their first flip. I don't care what anybody says. When I was doing my rentals, I was really scared. I mean, people were getting shot up in my neighborhood that I'm laying my money out to do a bird deal in a neighborhood that people are getting shot up at night. But I had to start somewhere. So I would say overall, the biggest setback, I mean, COVID was, knock on wood, thank God my tenants are good. They're all paying. I'd have to say probably the biggest setback was that very first property I bought. Because I was torn, like, oh, am I an investor or am I doing an owner occupant? I took all my money and it held me up for all that time that I could have used that cash and put it into investments instead of buying some stupid home that I didn't even want to live in to begin with, just because it was the thing to do.
Interesting.
So that was probably the biggest. That was the biggest. I'd say one of the biggest setbacks. I mean, there's other things along the way as far as construction wise and other headaches. I mean, I could go through the headaches for days with the closings getting pushed and this and that. But I'd say from the start, it was that big setback delay from the start,
Yeah. Was there a moment, and maybe you touched on it there, was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope, getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it and how did you overcome it?
Bro, I'll be honest with you. That was 2009 to 2011. I spent 2012, 4 years with these deals. Barry, when I tell you, I had homes I did appraisals on for $450,000 that were on the market for $200,000. And I'm like, the opportunity's there. And I could get the finance, I could do it. And I stood on the top ropes. I didn't do it, man. I didn't do it. And then 2015 came when I actually was working for and met like real investors doing it, that I was like, I'm going for it. That's it. Time waits for no man. We got the money, we got the mentors, we got everything. You just can't wait anymore and just keep grinding and stay up and just keep this ball rolling and scale this into, over X amount of units. In a short period of time, I went from 0 units to 2 to 4 to 8, all the way over 10 units already.
Yeah, I think like you said there, that what helped, I'm sure, a lot was who you surrounded yourself with, right? You surrounded yourself with these real estate investors, which kind of really helps, you're surrounded by successful people. They're going to drag you up and bring them along with you, just by being around them, just by osmosis. So that's cool, man. Man, you got a cool story. This has been so much fun, man. It's like the appraising side has been so interesting, but then like how you were able to buy those rentals, buy the flips, how you were able to do all that, your persistence, your love for it, your passion for it, your determination. It's been so cool, man. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. You never have guessed this is your first podcast because you've been awesome, man. You've been really, really a phenomenal guest. So I really appreciate that. Before I go, do you want to tell people where they can maybe reach out to you, get in touch with you, find out more about what you've got going on?
Yes, so I'm at real estate on Instagram, real estate _info, INFO, real estate _info. Listen, it just started out because, like I said, this is my entire life. Like real estate, just round the clock between the appraisal and the investing. And if you want to do something, you got to be obsessed with it. So I just started doing it, and I started documenting some of this information for people, investors, and realtors to understand, through the mindset of somebody who does the appraisals and investments. So they can find me on Instagram, and that's it. Some of the content's on there. There's more to come.
That's awesome. I think that's really valuable. I think that's such valuable content because, like you said, like it's so important to understand how you guys value stuff, right? Because if I'm buying a house, as we went back earlier, right? If I'm buying a house and I just improve the garden and I think, oh yeah, I made a nice garden, it's going to improve the value of the home. No, it's square footage, bedrooms, kitchens and bathrooms, right? Those are the main 4 things. So I think that's been a great insight today on what to take into consideration when you're improving a home. Thanks so much for being on, man. I really appreciate it. This was awesome, man. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for having me on. We'll definitely be in touch.